Okay, so I've got my data from the NBN. Hopefully you can see all this. It's a massive data set, 23,000 records, so that's 23,000 rows. And it's got loads of stuff, as you can see, running along, lots and lots of data about each record for adders. So here, one of the important ones has got occurrence status. So that's just saying present. It's useful to have a column somewhere in there which has got data all the way down, and it's just having the same thing. If you haven't got one like that, what you can do is go insert. That is actually a blank column. I'm going to call it count. And I'm just going to put a 1 in there. And that, I'm going to click on it. And just, if I move over that little dot and then double click, it copies a 1 in all 23,000 records. So I know it's a simple way of being able to count how many records there are. It's quite useful. Okay, so that's a useful one to be able to add. Another useful one that's to be able to add is to make sure that things like years and months are clear. Luckily for you, they've done that hard work already. So we've got start date here, which is when the record was noted, when the animal was seen, and they've split it into day and month and year. Right, and that's really useful. So what I'm going to do is create a pivot table from this data to summarise how many adders have been seen per year. So I click somewhere in the data set, and go to Insert and Pivot Table. So I'm hoping you can see this pop-up that's come up. If you can't, it's the Create Pivot Table pop-up. It's got Select Table or Range. That should have just selected all the data for you. It's saying it wants to go to a new worksheet. That's all fine. So you should just be able to hit OK, which brings us to this, which is a new tab that's opened, and it's where we're going to summarize our data. So over here, we've got all of the headers for the columns, and I'm going to just use some of that. So down here, I'm going to find year. So forget end date, those are a bit confusing, just ignore those. We want the start date year. I'm going to put that into rows. So now you can see my pivot table starting to build up here. You can see records go right back to 1600. Some historical stuff gone on there. And then I'm going to go up and find that count column that I put in. And that, like I said, this will actually work with any column that's got data in it of any kind, because all it is counting any cell that's got data in it. But I'm going to put that one in. So now you can see what it's done. It's counted any records that are there for that particular year. So you can see 1833, for some reason, there were a lot of adder records, which is a bit bizarre. Okay, but what I'd recommend to you is you'll just reduce what you're focusing on to the last decade or maybe the last 15 years, because that's maybe when online recording has really taken off a bit. And a lot of the problem here is not knowing how much effort was going into the recording for the data. When you've got public data, it's like how many people were interested at the time. So for some reason, 1833, there were a lot of people interested in adders, obviously, or a book about them. I don't know what it was, but you know, generally before that, it's just going to be the odd weird anecdote. And going up through the years, you can see there's increasing records, but nobody was doing it very systematically. All right. So I want to limit those years. So I'm going to go over here to where it says row labels, and under the drop down arrow, I can filter and select sections of the data. So I'm going down to uncheck select all, and then scroll down, and I'm going to just select the last few years. So like I said, think about what time frame you want to work with. If that's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, but I probably wouldn't go any further than 20 years. So you can see that it's very easy now. I've just reduced that huge data set of 23,000 records now, summarised it. So I've got how many adders were seen over the last 8 years. And if I want to make a graph or take this data out to analyse it, sort of linear regression or something, I can just copy that, paste it into a new spreadsheet. I'm just pasting it here so you can see, and then voila, a nice graph. There, that's fairly straightforward. So from massive data set to useful graph in 5 minutes. I hope that was useful.